Welcome back to another episode of the Blue Collar Soapbox with Danny Crouch. Danny, thanks for joining us again.
Good to see you, Matt. Great to be here.
Danny, it's such an important topic that you've raised for this series of episodes that we're talking through, and it is the absenteeism and turnover of staff in the blue collar industry. And for anybody that missed the first episode, would you be able to just give us those stats again of the impact from the report you found?
Yeah, sure. So, that report is from Gallup. It's the State of the Global Nation. I think that's the name of it. I confuse the words. Sometimes I think it's the global state of the nation, but it's something like that. It comes out annually, so you can excuse me for only reading it sort of once or twice a year. But the stats are pretty similar every year when we look at turnover and absenteeism. National average is around 12 to 13% in Australia. In the blue collar sector, it's between 19 and 26%. So on average, it's about double the national average. Now, that's pretty par for the course. Most companies hopefully will know those stats. What I found remarkable this year is that they've come out and done a lot of research around professional development and how that can impact those numbers. And it can decrease turnover and absenteeism by up to 42%. So successful plans can actually bring that blue collar sector back down to closer to the national average, which I think is a no-brainer. Every company should be looking to do that rather than just throwing money against the wall.
Absolutely. And that's what our next episode today is going to talk about.
Yeah.
We're going to delve into a little bit about the cost that this higher percentage turnover is having on any blue-collar industry business. And we're also just going to talk a little bit about, well, how do you measure it? How do you find it? And a few tips and tools that you have for being able to just figure out what this cost is and take the first steps to correcting it.
Yeah.
Just a couple of things before we deep dive into that. I just want to pick up on, we've had a little bit of a tech change in here. I apologize to any of our viewers on the previous episode. We had a little bit of a tech issue with the audio on my end. So as you can probably see, we've had a little bit of a change in our camera setup. So hopefully this works a bit better from here. Also, for those that are coming along on the journey, make sure that you like and subscribe. Wherever you're watching this video on any of the platforms, please drop us a like, and that helps bring more of an audience to Danny's message. As well, if you have any comments or questions, don't hesitate. Just drop them on the links below, and Danny might be able to address those himself. Or we can just create a little bit of conversation or debate about just these issues that are affecting the blue collar industry. Also with that, at the end of the last episode, Danny, you dropped a little teaser, a little do you know or did you know question, which was, do you know exactly how many days in a year your employees are working for you? Have you got the answer to that one?
Yeah, interesting. I think your response was pretty straightforward. 4 weeks holiday, so it must be 48 weeks. I like to actually dig down a lot deeper. So we're talking on general. So, different people have different shifts. They work weekends. They work, rostered days on and off and all that. But if we look at generalized, if we're talking about employees that do their 9 to 5 or 6 till 3 or whatever it is, 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, 365 days a year, you'd think hopefully somewhere around 300. It's actually 217. Yeah. So you take into consideration
217.
217. Yep.
Wow.
So you take into consideration if you're taking weekends off, you've got your 4 weeks annual leave. You've got on average 14 days sick leave. That's the national average at the moment. Yep. You've got your public holidays, which is around 10 per year. That drops that down to 217. So if you want to break down your numbers on how much someone's costing you, an employee, you can round off figures. So I like to use 100,000, 100 people, that sort of thing. So if you say someone's earning 100 grand, people would most likely say, they're earning about 2 grand a week. What's that per day? $400 a day. If that's how you run your numbers, when you actually work out 217 days by 100,000, it's around the $460 a day. So it's $60 a day per employee higher than what you actually calculate. Now, a lot of the figures we use, it's similar to data. You can pick and choose the data you want. We try and generalize it. And when we estimate down rather than up. So we look at 450 a day, not 460. But the lead measures we marry to is the number of employees you've got, your annual turnover on average for the past 3 years, because obviously you got COVID around 2020, so we don't want to go too far back with that. You got your absenteeism, how many days sick people are having, and then the average working week. So again, you're going to have different shift workers and all that sort of stuff. So most companies will know what they are. The companies just need to trade that information, and then we turn that into what that's costing your business and where savings could come in. Now, what we don't take into consideration, and this is a big one that I think is hidden for a lot of companies, when you have high turnover, that puts a lot of stress and burnout on your existing employees. And that's quite difficult to measure. Productivity and profitability are probably the only real measurements. But you can imagine if this has been going on for 3 years and your turnover rate stayed pretty much the same, you can't really read much into your productivity and profitability. So you need to see a vast difference. So we don't calculate that in. We just purely look at the numbers around how many employees are leaving, how many employees are taking days off. Now, the reason why I put into place the absenteeism as well, if you imagine if you calculate the number of days off your employees take off, those days they are not in the workplace is the equivalent to 1 or 2 or 3 employees' full year's salary, okay? So, for example, if you've got 100 staff, you've got a 20% turnover, which means 20 people leave every year. And of those 100 staff, they on average take 14 days a year. It ends up being 1,400 days a year your staff are absent from work, on sick leave, on that sort of stuff. So that's the equivalent of 6.5 employees that are away from work. You're paying the wages of 6.5 employees. So you're losing 20. And then you got another 6.5 that aren't showing up. Massive, massive numbers.
Massive numbers. Absolutely. That's mind-blowing. Because all of these numbers and that you're putting in, if you were to put that back into productivity terms,
yeah,
when you're measuring your benchmarks of productivity or output against your staff numbers, you're down by over a quarter of your perceived production output.
Yeah.
So you're working 75% of your staff, that extra amount, just through just these natural, unforeseen numbers of staff and the turnover of those. So are there, so in the Gallup reporting that you were introducing us to in the previous episode, are there benchmarks that you use from that reporting where you can step into one of these businesses and have best practice numbers, or how does that go? Talk to me about how you begin to find these numbers, how you break them down, and how you help a business start to identify, address, and fix these areas.
Yeah, look, that's interesting. I try not to have benchmarks. I use the data as like, okay, these are the case studies, but I take every business on its individual merits. Now, some people will go, oh, well, you must be attracted to the 25, 26, 27% turnover problem companies. Well, that's a bigger challenge. That's going to be a bigger effort, because to me, that says there's already some level of toxicity within the company. So if I'm approached by a blue collar industry or a business that their level is below 19%, I already know straight away they've got things that are working okay because they're below the national average. I know it can get down to the complete national average of around 12 or 13%. It's just whether or not the leadership team and the business owners are prepared to do what it takes. When it's up around the 25%, more often than not, there's issues within the leadership group. And the reason why it's been going on for so long is accountability. And too many companies want to point the finger and start to blame others. You know, it's the HR's fault because they hired the wrong people, or it's the employee, the generation of the employees that don't want to work, or, you know, they're just lazy, or whatever the excuse you want to come up with. Yeah, okay. If we want to look at it like that, let's look at your last 3 years. How have you been going? And has your turnover been going down or going up? And what excuses are you going to put? Oh, you know, my competitors are stealing all my staff. Well, you can't steal someone who's happy and loves working where they're working. If they're coming out and offering double and triple the pay, are they worth it? If they are, why aren't you paying them? Now, I'm not saying give everyone a pay rise. I'm saying you've got to evaluate what you're doing and how you can make it better for you and your company.
It's really, it's a different solution for each different company.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there are those that are aware. There are those that have the appetite for correction, for chasing what these issues are. So they're already on the trend of bringing down that number. But you've got ways that you can then step in alongside them and help accelerate that reduction of the percentage. But then, I guess then you've got two other groups. One that are just unaware of these hidden issues within their business and they haven't started looking. Or there's the other group that they're aware of it, but they just don't know how to approach it. They just don't know how to put the measurements in place.
Yeah.
So there's multiple different ways that a coach can come in and help. And I would imagine that the cost of having a coach come in would be fractional compared to the costs of what this is costing per business. And that's a segue, I guess, into the next question that I want to ask you. Do you know, just on average, can you just give me just some figures? I mean, we were talking off air and it's just mind blowing. So and we learnt in the last episode, my math isn't great. So keep it easy for me. Let's work on a company that has 100 employees.
Yep.
Can you run through some figures for me and just highlight just what sort of impact this is having?
Sure. And again, they're hypothetical numbers. They're on average. It doesn't mean there's going to be a company that exists out there that does this. And I like to work with 100. 100 simple. It's easy to work out percentages and stuff like that. So if you've got a company with 100 employees, from C-suite down to the cleaners and the sweepers or whatever level, on average, you're paying them 100 grand a year, and you've got a turnover rate of 20%. So blue collar average is 19 to 26. Let's go the low end. Let's go with 20. It's low, but it's also an easy number to go with. So if you're paying on average 100 grand a year for 100 employees, your payroll is $10 million per year. Okay. Now, a question I like to ask, imagine you're a plumber and you've got to buy a box of washers and they cost $10. Are you the type of plumber that is constantly looking around for better washers at a better price and more competitive? Or do you wait until that box of washers goes up in price and then start shopping around and looking for things better? Or do you just stick with the same washers because they're what you've always used? So there's three different mindsets there. Do you look after your employees just the way they always have? And the statistics that come in, well, that's what's happened for the last 10 years. So that's what's going to keep happening. We don't need to spend anything. We don't need to worry about anything. Or are you constantly looking for ways to improve turnover and to improve absenteeism, to keep good talent, to really nurture and look after your staff? Or do you wait until something goes wrong and then you start looking? Okay. So you know you're spending $10 million a year on your payroll. Okay. Now, the national average, your average turnover for the last 3 years is 20% per year. So 20% of $10 million, that's $2 million a year. Now, where do I come up with that number? Again, Gallup's data. They report that through the recruitment sort of industries around the world, that the cost to replace one employee is between 50% and 200% of that employee's salary. Okay. Now, where do we go? 50%, 200%? Again, I'm going to go lower to the low side. I just say 100%. It's nice and easy, double the number. But also, I don't go to 50% because I know for a fact the companies that it only cost 50%, they're below the national average of 12% turnover because they've got good systems, they've got a good culture. It's easy to bring people in and train them. So the worse your turnover, the higher it's going to cost you to replace employees. So if we just look at the 100%, so one employee, $100,000 a year to replace them, let's look at it costing $100,000 a year. Not considering productivity, not considering profitability, not considering the stress and burnout on the team for 3 months or 6 months having to carry the workload, because that's how long it takes a new employee. It'll take 3 to 6 months to get them to the level where the previous employee was. Mm-hmm. Now I can get pushback and someone will go, yeah, but that employee was crap. He wasn't that good anyway. Well, my first question is, what's he doing in the company? Who hired him, and why do you want employees there that aren't worth what they're worth? So we want to focus on good talent and not losing good staff. If your turnover rate is high because you keep sacking people because they're useless, then look at your hiring process and what you've got to look after. And if you're going to turn around and say, oh, well, there's nothing out there, we can't find good quality. Even more important to keep the good stuff you've already got.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So, yeah, $2 million a year you're throwing out the door, trying to rehire, retrain, go through that process. Guess what? Yes, it keeps HR in their job, but it's adding more work to them. The higher the turnover, the more people they got to hire, the more resumes they got to go through, the more stress and burnout they get onto. And then, of course, we've got absenteeism as well. So those numbers, I won't go through the details, but it's about the equivalent of 6.5 employees if you've got the national average of 14 days per year. So that now becomes $2.6 million a year of your payroll you're paying additionally for less productivity. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
And
so in effect, you're paying $10 million for $7.4 million worth of employee workforce productivity.
Right. And so that was coming back to our point where we were saying the 75% productivity of your 100% of your workforce.
Yeah.
But it's actually less than that, because if you have a certain percentage of your workforce in training, then they're not at 100% of their output anyway. So that puts even more pressure on that output number.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which has a higher strain through the business, which causes more stress on the existing workforce. And then it's just that cycle. It's just that continual ongoing cycle. And if you're not aware of it, or if you're not going to do anything about it, it's just going to continue going round and round.
And another point I need to make out too. The target here isn't to get turnover down to zero and no one can take a day off work because they're sick. The difference when it comes to absenteeism, what Gallup suggests is there's a difference between absenteeism due to sickness, like the flu or headaches or whatever, and absenteeism of people taking days off for stress, burnout, Aussies just chucking a sickie because they can't be bothered going to work, or they're just over it, or they're sick of their manager. So that's a vast number. So 14 is high. It used to be pre-COVID, I think it was around 11. That's jumped up 3 days. It doesn't sound like much, but that's somewhere around another 1.5 to 2 employees' annual salary. So it does add up if you combine the numbers. So how does that play out? Well, if you can imagine, your turnover's high, right? So the people left in the work are doing the work of 2, 3 people. They're staying back late. They're burning out. They're getting stressed because the project's under pressure now to get finished. Guess what? They get sick. Their immune system breaks down. They need time off. Therefore, they're more likely to take sick leave. So when you can, all these sort of issues come from the same sort of tone. So you combine them together. So if you fix the turnover problem, in effect, it fixes the absentee problem. So you'd bring one down and it brings the other one down with it, and the profitability and the productivity goes up. People want to show up to work. They're used to seeing the same people every day, for years. What happened to the old golden watch for staying at a business for 40 years or 50 years? It doesn't exist.
I mean, you could count the the number of people that stay with the one company for that long. I mean, gee, and Gallup probably has these in their numbers. They're that fully researched. But when was the last time you heard about somebody one company all the way through in this day and age? I'm really just flabbergasted, really, and I want a better word than flabbergasted, but I just cannot believe these numbers. And if it is unseen in your business, then when they sit down to have a look at it, just imagine all the other avenues that this can stem from, that they can then have quick fixes against things that they must have been banging their head against the wall for years and not knowing where it's coming from.
Well, that's the surprising thing, mate. A lot of people, and especially Australians, they don't necessarily bang their heads against the wall, and they will do something like they'll compare an average from Gallup, and they'll go, well, actually, we're at 19.5%, so we've got no problems. The national average in the blue sector is 19 to 26. We're on the low end. Hey, don't worry about it, because you're comparing yourself to another company. Why not compare yourself to you and say, well, 19.5 isn't good enough. I don't want to be blowing $1.95 million a year on turnover. Let's get that down to 1.6 or 1.5. It can be done, and it's been proven to be done, and it's not that big a process. It's not simple, but you've just got to buy in and be accountable and push the culture in your company to where you want it to be. Another actually interesting stat they came out with, and I think it's a bit of a myth these days where people say, oh yeah, people only leave because of money. The two top reasons why people leave their job, somewhere around 33% leave because of poor management and poor leadership, and around 30% leave because of a toxic work environment. So it could be, not getting along with colleagues, or the customers are, off color or whatever. Money comes in around 20%. So 60% is around the leadership and culture, 20% is about money. Now, it's a common sort of thing in the blue collar sector, especially in transport and logistics. A lot of people do get poached for money. So a lot of that is people leaving because they can get a pay rise over here and a pay rise over there. So that number is probably a little bit higher than I would like to think it is, because I don't think people are literally going, I can't stand this job because I'm not getting paid enough. It's more, oh, that guy over there's offering more, I'm going to jump ship.
So maybe the money's the last straw. Maybe they wouldn't be entertaining offers of bigger money if those first two things that you were talking about were sorted within their current workplace. If they weren't in a toxic environment, and if they didn't have poor leadership, one of, or maybe both of those things, then they wouldn't be out entertaining other offers.
Yeah.
If anybody came knocking on the door, they just don't answer because they're happy where they are, and it's not a thing.
Yeah, an interesting side adjunct sort of thing. Another measurement Gallup's have come out with is that they found that employees are 7 times happier if they have friends at work.
Right.
Yeah. So in other words, they enjoy going to be in the company of who they work with.
It's not really work anymore, is it? It's social. You're having fun. You're upbeat.
Yeah.
And happy to be there. Yeah. So there are so many different starting points, I guess, to try to break down, okay, what is the root cause of this problem? And as we discussed earlier, it's not the same in every company. It's different in every company. And there are two different types of leaders that need to hear this. There's the leader that's just going to stick their head in the sand and no, don't worry about it. We're at this percentage. I'm happy with that. It is what it is. Or there's the leader that's going to take notice and say, right, yeah, I can make a change, or I can improve this. And at the end of the day, it's going to have a flow-on effect positively throughout every aspect of the business. And that's where coaching comes in. I mean, so you're talking about millions of dollars that is affecting every business.
Yeah.
I'm sure that you'd love to be charging millions and millions of dollars, but I know that you don't. And the cost of having yourself or somebody like you come into the business and help just take the blinders off, the blinkers off, and just, right, let's have an unbiased look at, right, what is the root cause? of all of these different areas is just going to have, it'll be the best investment that they can make in their business this year. And that'll be compounded ongoing.
Yeah.
I know that we're going to continue to go through in this series, and we're going to have a look at the impact on the employer. We're going to have an impact, look at the impact on the employees, and you're going to dive into just those impacts as well, and just how to identify and resolve those. But I guess this is all about being a call to action for you, Danny. I mean, you've seen this report, you've seen these numbers, and I know that this is a passion for you, that this just needs to change.
Yeah.
For all of our listeners that are leading blue collar businesses at the moment, how do they find you? How do they get a hold of you to start the process of correcting with this within their business?
Yeah, obviously, wherever they're watching this video, whichever social media platform it is, if it is LinkedIn, you can DM me. Hopefully, you've connected to me already. Through the website, chooseyourchapter.com.au. That's chooseyourchapter.com.au. We do go global, but I mainly focus on Australian companies. And I'd also like to throw an idea out there, again, hypothetical. So 100 staff, 20% turnover with 6.5% absenteeism, so 26.5. It's costing them 2.6 million per year in turnover loss, and Gallup suggests 42% reduction in that area. So that's roughly around $1 million a year. So two questions. How much do you think it'd be worth to a company to reduce their turnover rates by $1 million, what Gallup represents? And then by 500,000. So if we only got half of what Gallup recommends, how much would that be worth to them in a year? But keep in mind, that's just not for 1 year. They would continue to save that year on, as long as they keep developing their culture and working on it. What's that worth to them?
Absolutely. So it's just, yeah, the compounding improvements. It's just
comment literally in the comments. Put in there how much do you think it'd be worth a company to save $500,000 a year?
Yeah, that's a great shout out. So all of our listeners, leave the comments, leave your thoughts down below. And whilst you're doing so, please like and subscribe so that you can hear more from Danny, Blue Collar Coach, with this knowledge that he has about the blue collar industry. And somebody has to call it out. And Danny, you're the one to do so. So
hope so.
Great to chat to you again. I'm really looking forward to what's coming in the next episodes to really peel back just what effects this is having on both employer and employee. And I know that you're going to share a couple of personal stories as well. So looking forward to that. Danny, thanks again for your time. And I'll chat to you again in the next episode of the Blue Collar Soapbox.
Pleasure. Thanks for being there. Beep, beep.